write up on Facebook, for instance, talking about this merger. You talk about the fact that, well, in principle, it's not so bad. It is the timing. What exactly is wrong with the timing?
Well, now when you do a merger, what you're basically doing is you're looking for a synergy, and that is good for the promotion of efficiency, cost effectiveness, and probably derive some value for money in from two separate entities, which is a good idea. We we have VRA operating hydro as a base and also operating thermal plants and some renewables. We Power Authority also belong to Ghana, also operating hydro and renewables. And so merging them and it's good, but then you need to prepare the grounds first so that you get about best out of the situation. Each of these entities have their own peculiar challenges, which require urgent attention. If you go into the VRA domain, basically all the hydro that is generated, a bulk of that significant portion is given to ECG and VACO for either direct consumption for or onward sale. These two entities owe the VRA significant amount of money, and also there are delayed payments as well. Based on the cash waterfall system, which must ensure transparent, equitable distribution of the cash raised by ECG, it's not really working, and VRA is getting approximately 30% of that on month-to-month basis, which means that there are accumulated debt as well. Now, VRA is so much dependent on the thermal assets for survival. They use the thermal assets to sell to the mines, the thermal enclave, and also for the export market, where they get hard currency just to maintain their system and keep afloat, because the hydro base that they sell to ECG and VACO, they are not getting enough. And so if you hive off the thermal assets from VRA, then you have exposed it to a greater challenge, where it's now going to be basically dependent on hydro. And we've spoken about the hydro and their issues with ECG and VACO. And so what we must first need to do is work to address the liquidity challenge VRA is going through because of the non-payment or delayed payment from the ECG and VACO, for instance. If we're able to address that, and we know the cash waterfall system mechanism is working, and you want to hive off the thermal, then of course you can be sure that they will be liquid and they will be operational and they will be able to undertake infrastructure upgrade and maintenance to give us the power that we so much require or desire as a country. If you leave them, just bare, then of course they're going to suffer or struggle in producing for us as a country that power that we require, and that means another round of doom looming. And so we're saying that let's first prioritize, the liquidity challenge in the system. Then, of course, we can look forward to a merger at a later time. But for now, the timing is wrong.
So essentially, your argument is that, at this point in time, if the separation or merger should take place, VRA will be at a very disadvantaged position because one of its crucial resources, which is thermal, is going to be taken away from it.
The case. It's not going to just be an issue or it's not going to just hit VRA as a company, but the entire country. And you know that we use the hydro as the base for our power generation with something we call black start. I don't want us to go to the 10-card domain, but then if you have a plant that can start with just a flip of a thumb. That's the hydro base. If you depend on the thermals, they cannot stop quickly, even when they go down. They have to go through some protocols before they come up in about an hour or two. But for thermal hydropower plants, if they go down within 1 second, the next second or two, they could come up because of the gravity that they enjoy from the water. So we are just trying to probably appeal to government to engage extensively a transparent, open dialogue with all the industry players, particularly the VRA staff and management, so that they can really dot all the I's, cross the T's, and ensure that we've done a good risk assessment of what we intend to do as a country.
And you just mentioned the subject of the VRA in some of these, the workers of some of these entities and all that. Especially for the VRA staff, they are concerned that this is a way of privatizing. This is a way of making it easier for the thermal aspects to be privatized, and to some extent, describing it as state capture. Is there merit in what they are saying?
Well, we are unable to tell, but I'm sure their suspicions stem from the numerous meetings they had initially with the ministry and the assurance given to them earlier on, as they claim that there won't be that separation of assets. Then they also proceeded to management when this bill popped its head, and management refuted and did not accept that they had any knowledge of the issue until at a later date. And so I'm sure that's brewing their suspicion about seeking to take away the assets and giving to cronies or other private people of political, inclination. And so I'm sure that's what's generating that suspicion. But we are unable to speak to it directly. IES.
In situations like these, when there are some of these proposals, some argue that when there are agitations from workers, it's usually more about their interest they are seeking to protect, because if there is a merger, it will mean that one person will perhaps be doing the job of three, and so two people will be left redundant. And so sometimes that could be the reason you would hear people agitate. Would you say that could also be a factor in here, or this is basically on genuine concerns?
Now, the staff group are part of the stakeholders within the power sector, and every stakeholder has interest. So if the staff are protecting their interests, there's nothing wrong with that. But then let's ask ourselves, is it a sound argument that they are putting out? They are telling us that it is the thermal asset that's keeping them afloat. They are not getting almost 70% of the power sales from the hydro to ECG and Baku. They are not getting that money. The thermal assets that they have put forward to the export market and to the mines, and they get hard currency, not just to maintain their system, but to procure fuel for the IPPs, because it is government commitment to buy fuel for the independent power producers, and that government commitment has been unloaded to the VRA, and from the same thermal generation sales, they get money to buy fuel for the country. It means that they hold some high responsibilities within the power sector, and knowing very well that it's their cash cow. If they have to feed it to another entity, then of course they are largely exposed, and they have to protect their jobs, and which we find nothing wrong with. And so if that's their interest, it's a sound one.
Right. And what are your expectations of Parliament in relation to these proposed bills? It's not been laid yet, but the conversation have been going on? Should it end up in Parliament? What would be your expectation?
Yes, of course. We know very well that when it gets to Parliament, the Select Committee will look at it before it even come to the main floor. Our expectation is that they ensure that government does extensive consultation, and the dialogue must be so transparent as well. And let's undertake risk assessment so we ensure that VRA is not exposed, or the combined entity of VRA and we is not exposed unnecessarily, which to some extent could hurt us as a country through unreliable power supply.
And we talked about timing earlier, where you referenced, for instance, the death-old VRA, among many others. Others are also raising the issue of political timing. Is there merit in that argument for those who say that, looking at the dying embers of this administration, where we are at the moment, it'll be more significant to leave it to the next administration to decide whether to merge it or otherwise? What are your thoughts on that?
Governance is a continuum. And so we find nothing wrong with the start of this conversation.
All right.
That's our position.
And finally, are we out of the woods when it comes to doom so? Because we have seen, significant stability in the recent past.
We can't say for sure now. Some of these incidents, even this bill's discussion, can push us into doom so. If we will want to probably give fuel to the fire, but if you look at the staff of VRA's position, and you see them starting to fly their red flags, it's very necessary for us to treat it as a national security issue, because if we touch wood, if they go deeper, it could hurt us as a country. I don't want to open it. This not a good platform for us to discuss it. But then we are not out of the woods. Anything at all can spark a doom so. Fuel supply issue, industrial agitation, anything can flip us back into that unfortunate situation of doom so.
And what would prevent that?
Open dialogue.
Between who and who?
Between government and the VRA, between government, industry players, between government and the legislature. Is very important. Every stakeholder within the power sector must be assessed and, discuss the issues.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for your time. We're grateful that you were able to speak to us.
Thanks for having me, Nadidi. Good morning once again.
Good morning once again. So you had us engaged, and now Amwesi the seventh. He is the executive director of the Institute for Energy Securities. Ibrahim Alassan is here with me. We're going to dwell a bit more on this subject because from what we know, there were attempts to lay these bills before the House when they were that during that emergency recall. Ibrahim,
yes.
Can we go through some of them? Well, first of all, were there those attempts?
Yes, indeed. And the only thing that stopped these LIs, these are legislative instruments, from being laid. And once, of course, let's educate the public listeners on legislative instruments. Unlike bills, that will have to go through a certain process and terminate at the entire House, as in the plenary, making a determination as to whether the bill should pass or not. LIs are sent to the subsidiary legislation committees for pre-laying formalities. After that is done, once it comes to the plenary and it is laid, it has to take 21 certain days. And these LIs will mature and they will become effective. Just a few days ago, we brought to listeners an interview with the Minister for Trade and Industry, Katie Hammond, who was excited that his controversial LI had matured. And he was very upbeat about the fact that the maturity of the ILI will ensure that prices of cement will come down, because he intends setting up a committee. The committee is supposed to inspect the price build-up of all these cement manufacturing companies. Good. So that's just to give you an indication as to how an LI works. And so if it had been late, that will have counted as day one. That was the very first day of the emergency sitting.
Okay.
The second day will have counted as day two.
Day two.
When the House returned from its break, then the counting will continue until 21 days. But what happened was that hard copies of these LIs were not
Not
ready.
available. How many LIs are we?
We are
dealing
talking
with?
about 3 of them actually. 3 LIs as we speak nowadays. So the Ghana Nuclear Power Corporation Bill 2024, the Ghana Hydro Authority Bill 2024, and then the Ghana Thermal Authority Bill 2024. And in your engagement with Nana Mosi, you related to the fact that the thermal aspect of the work of the VRA.
It's being hyped off.
Exactly. It's been hived off. And if that happens, it means another authority will have to be put together to go.
The
And that's
Thermal Authority.
Thermal Authority.
Per the proposal.
Per the proposal. But then Bui is hydro. Of course, Akosombo is equally hydro. And then so you have the hydro coming together.
And the thermals
going together. And then there's also another attempt to merge
The
NEDCO,
Okay.
and then ECG. NEDCO and ECG as well. And so when it comes to Bui, the reason why VRA senior staff or the workers there
So
are
we're looking at 4.
Four,
The
actually.
distribution will be for NEDCO and ECG.
Yes.
And then nuclear will be for, I'm sure, we have a nuclear authority. And
Yes.
then the hydro will be VRA Bui. And then the thermal will be all the other thermal plants we have.
put together.
Okay.
Good. Now,
Including the private ones?
no, the private ones, of course, they sell to government directly.
Okay.
So
So
they
we're
will be
looking at
dealing
something like
with
a
the
12.
distributors.
For instance, the Etuabo gas.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And so, for instance, when Bui is merged with VRA, as we speak, Bui has a CEO, right?
Yeah.
Good. VRA has a CEO. So when Bui merges with VRA, one portfolio must give way. So automatically, one CEO will lose his job or her job. Automatically.
Yeah.
Good. As we speak now, Bui has head of HR. Same with VRA. If this measure takes place, one of them will lose the job. Together with all the similar arrangements that we have, right? So there will be some level of redundancy, and packages, I'm sure, will be made available for such people. Aside that, the other argument, and I've heard the workers advance this argument strongly, is the cash flow for VRA. And the fact that even as we speak, there are some amount of monies that are to be paid to VRA from players in the sector, including government.
Yeah.
That has not been done.
Yes.
Chances are, if this measure takes place, those monies will not
Will
be paid
not
at
be paid.
all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the NAMWC also references the same,
Yeah.
that at the moment there's huge indebtedness to VRA.
VRA,
And
yes.
so if you merge them at this point in time, I mean, you deduce from it that it means that the money will be gone
Exactly.
because they'll be considered the same.
Exactly. Interestingly, guess which other manifesto has this promise? The NDC manifesto. But that promise is for Bui and then VRA.
Okay.
It doesn't involve NEDCO and ECG, and it doesn't involve all the others. That proposal that has been advanced by the NDC is a full measure to ensure that all the hydro generating plants or point are converged, so they don't work across purposes. As we speak, Bui is supplementary. Bui only kicks in at a particular time of the day. It's unable to generate power 24/7, unlike what Akosombo does. And so, as at the point the country has higher demand, it's called a peak demand, then the 8-hour generation from Bui will come and kick in. After that, that plant goes off. So there are many people who argue that, so when the plant goes off after the 8 hours, what then becomes of the workers? Are we getting efficiency? So will such a measure ensure that at least when the plant goes off after the 8 hours, there are other technical people who, for instance, be going to Akosombo to be working, right? That those arguments are advanced. But of course, like I said, in my engagement with the energy sector players in NDC, they say that for Bui and VRA, yes, it's in the manifesto that eventually, if the party comes to power, the measure will happen. Yes.
So, I mean, there's a possibility that there will be support for this in Parliament.
Exactly.
For the hydro authority.
But even with that, the how, according to the NDC, is very important. So we had Ahmed Ibrahim, for instance, arguing against any such ally. And his argument was that, first of all, the timing was wrong, 3 months to an election. Why would the government seek to undertake such an exercise? And many other arguments. But of course, we have those allies here. So I'm sure we'll take listeners through these, a few of them.
Okay.
So the Hydro Authority bill, here, which has its objective as to establish the Ghana Hydro Authority to develop hydroelectric power or any other hydroelectric power site on the Volta River or any other river determined by the state, and develop renewable energy or any other clean energy alternative in the country. Right. As part of the restructuring of the power sector, it has become imperative to realign institutions within the sector in order to address critical issues and improve efficiency in the sector. The realignment includes the consolidation of hydro assets, including renewable assets, the separation of thermal power generation, the measure of the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission, yes, which has not been touched on. The PURC will equally be merged with the Energy Commission.
Okay.
So PURC, as we've known it, which is a regulator, will equally be merged with the Energy Commission. The energy transition and establishment of a nuclear power program. And so this is how groundswelling these changes are. So I related to the fact that the bosses of Bui and VRA, one of them will have to make way. Same with PURC and then the Energy Commission. Now, the consolidation of the Volta River Authority and the Bui Power Authority and the establishment of the state-owned hydropower generation company are intended to improve operational efficiencies, attract private sector financing into the operations of the state-owned power plant, and then also minimize the financial support of government and minimize the cost of power generation and ultimately the cost of power supply to consumers. And this is where the workers are shouting and screaming state capture. Right. And then you go further to talk about the realignment process requires a review of existing legislation on the power sector and then enactment of new legislation to govern various aspects of the power sector. The bill therefore seeks to establish the Ghana Hydro Authority in order to improve operational efficiency.
You're reading the memorandum, right?
Yeah, basically that's it. And that gives you an idea as to what government's sense of thinking
what they are seeking
is.
to cure.
So basically that's it. Energy Commission gives way, PURC gives way, BUI gives way, Volta River Authority gives way.
Let's see what the objective of the Thermal Authority 2 is.
Yeah.
It says that the object of the bill is to establish the Ghana Thermal Authority to develop and operate thermal power plants at the Abuadze, Tema, and Kumasi generation enclaves and any other enclave determined by the state. I was here mentioning it, Trouble. I said Abuadze, Tema, and Kumasi.
Abuadze. Yeah.
All right. So as part of the restructuring of the power sector, it has become imperative to realign institutions within the sector in order to address critical issues and improve efficiency in the sector. The realignment includes a consolidation of hydro assets. Okay, I think it's a quite repetition. The Ghana Thermal Authority bill is intended to improve operational efficiencies in the thermal power sector, attract private sector investment into the operations of state-owned thermal power plants, minimize the financial support of government in the thermal power sector, minimize the cost of thermal power generation, and ultimately minimize the cost of supply of thermal power to customers. The realignment process requires a review of existing legislation on the power sector and the enactment of new legislation. So I think it's quite similar to what is contained in the hydro. That, depending on which institution or which authorities reformed, we hear more of that. So I think the other ones will have similar ones as well.
Yes, let me give you the Power Distribution Authority bill.
Which is
finally,
ECG,
NEDCO, and yes, the two of them actually. The object of the bill is to establish the Ghana Power Distribution Authority to develop and operate the electricity distribution networks in the operational areas of the Electricity Company of Ghana Limited and the Northern Electricity Distribution Company, and to hold the sales license for metering, billing, and revenue collection to all regulated customers. As part of the restructuring of the power sector, it has become imperative to realign blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, they tell you about the Energy Commission and the PRC equally, which happens to be the two regulators for the sector. PRC specifically has got to do with the utility service providers. And so if that merges with Energy Commission, then the regulation would then become more or less like holistic. Not just the power distributors, not just the utility providers, but also relative to licensing and what have you in that regard. Okay. So NEDCO and ECG will now become part of the Ghana Power Distribution Authority.
Okay, all right.
And there are many others in that regard. Like you mentioned, 4 of them, actually. It's the breaking down of the entire structure of the energy sector and restructuring it and building it up again.
Okay, well,
yeah.
Nana Mwisi says it's good.
Yeah.
The intention behind it is good.
Yeah.
It's a timing.
Yeah.
And for him, the timing is in relation to, for instance, the debt-owed VRA and all that. When it comes to the political timing, they believe that it's government is a continuum.
Yes.
And so it doesn't matter what time the merger is done. You just have to dialogue more and ensure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. Yeah. This is the Morning Star here on Star 103.5 FM. I have a few messages to bring your way. And we